Good afternoon, everyone. I'm down here at the Monaca Park here by the old Water Authority Fort, and what comes to mind looking here through the Ohio River on this, one of the last summer weekends we're going to have on a Saturday afternoon here. It's breezy here on the river, which is nice, but it's also very hot. It's about 90 degrees right now. And I wanted to talk about one of the famous chiefs from which this town is named after, Monacatootha. Monacatootha has a very close relation to this Ohio River Valley, and he, like other chiefs, had very close connections with George Washington. And I want to celebrate his life in this video by you just looking at this very important piece of water history here in front of you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about his contributions to this area, as well as just contributions to not only local history, but certainly, the national history. So let's get into this. The infancy of the American Indian in Beaver County is sacred and obscure. Many of its residents claim some form of descendants from tribes that inhabited this Ohio Valley, as well as Indians from the West and the South. But it is well-deserved and ornate heritage that has both social and civil influence deeply rooted throughout this county. But, a particular characteristic that's created as such a discerning and lavish testament is Monacatootha. In 1753, Beaver County was primarily occupied by the French. But in order to terminate their influence and extinguish political control, the English desperately needed to amalgamate Indian treaties and royal support from the English throne. But to achieve that objective, they established well-supported common communications, exceedingly lavish trade relationships, and military support against the French, who were constantly threatening and plundering their occupied territory. But to irritate instances further, a young Virginia militia commander, whose name was George Washington, he was sent to establish cheery and healthy relations with the already hostile Indians who bitterly resented the growing French occupation. Washington met with Monacatootha at Logstown, which would be later Legionville. Now, the Iroquois Confederacy appointed two chiefs to preside over those Indians at Logstown. One was Tanacarisan over the Delawares, whom I wrote an article about, and of course the other is Monacatootha. A young and nervous Washington journeyed to meet them, and he was a high-ranking French commander with them to fully discuss the Ohio Valley situation. But after some considerable debate and meaningless attempts at negotiations, the French informed Washington that any Englishmen who attempted to trade or establish routes along the Ohio would be taken prisoner. Well, of course, this presented a problem. Fearing for the lives of the men who worked along the banks of the Ohio, the governor, who was Dinwiddie, he sent Washington back to the area with a band of militia. With nervous energy, the Indians awaited Washington's return. The French withdrew their forces from Venango, which constituted 1,000 men. However, the French forces far outnumbered the English, which ultimately compelled the Indians to side with the French out of fear and desperation. I mean, can you imagine thousands of men or even 1,000 men with bayonets and guns, which Native Americans did not have access to at this time, nor did they invent, nor did they could foresee that such a formidable weapon could be held in the hands of a human being. I mean, seriously, you need to think about these things for a bit. Witnessing these venomous actions in horror, Monacatootha, believing this is a circumstance of trickery by the French, he made it his solemn duty to retaliate and rise to the defense of his new friend, which was George Washington. He emptied and burned his entire village, and he put his people in canoes, and he proclaimed them as new members of Washington's army. The message was candid and it was tense, but to all the remaining Indians in the area, he would not succumb his people to French authority. A little bit of irony there if you have read my other posts, but that's the situation that was at hand at this particular time in Ohio Valley history. Almost every nation of the Iroquois Confederacy was united in the peaceful but clever actions Monacatootha had undertaken against the white invaders. Even with his people despondent and indignant, Monacatootha took more vindicating actions for the preservation of his culture and his people. He assisted Washington in taking out arms at the Battle of Fort Necessity. You all know about that, I would presume, if you've watched a lot of my videos. I have not made a video of that a fort of necessity, but I think everybody here would, know what that entails. Despondent and humiliated, Washington, he did surrender to the French and he returned Virginia. However, Monacatootha and his people could not return the Ohio Valley. No, that wasn't going to happen because even in the sight of full French occupation, the Indians in this area did not surrender their lands, not at this time. So these categories are separate instances, separate experiences, and separate results. I just want to emphasize that. But his struggle for the perseverance of his people would not be extinguished. And that, of course, that was the primary objective of most of the chiefs who lived here. Chief Logan, Shingas, Chief King Beaver, so on. Queen Aliquippa. He journeyed to New York to protest the malicious Wyoming Purchase, where Indians were fed alcohol and signed away their rights of land ownership to white authority, which was a very effective commonality among negotiations with tribal members, different Indian cultures, and so forth. But as a direct result of that, the Iroquois Confederacy, they would not permit white settlers in the Wyoming Valley. Years and many blood massacres later, and you're looking at it all around you with all this progress, white settlers eventually cultivated these lands with savagery and violence. That's just a fact. Enter the year 1755, if you will. Now, again, I realize that I'm going over these instances and historical marks, very quickly, but I'm just trying to make a very, very in-depth, informative, but short video. And in most cases on YouTube, that's very challenging, for a person like myself and for other YouTubers as well. 1755, General Braddock was sent from England to force the French to abdicate their established influences and locations in this region. Now, you must remember, if many of you do not know, the French were here first. They occupied these regions before the English did, just so you know, especially here in this county. Fort Pitt before that was Fort Duquesne. That was occupied. That was a French settlement, occupied, created, and everything was a French influence originally. General Braddock was sent to England to force the French to abdicate their established influences, but unlike his counterpart, he deeply resented the American Indians, and he labeled them as ignorant and crude savages. Washington, on the other hand, he was completely incapable of convincing Braddock that he desperately needed the Indians to fight the French. He was not aware of the skill set that, even though that they had not accessed or invented the weapons of European white establishments, that they were very effective fighters. In grave error, he exiled them, save but a few. Some years later, it was discovered that a British officer kept a journal of some of the military excursions of General Braddock, which we find a mention of Monacatootha, and he wrote, and I quote this, okay, Monacatootha, as chief of our Indians, being on the advance of the day before, was met by 70 Indians and some French who bound him and were going to kill him. An Indian of his own nation, being among them, entreated that he might have his liberty, which after some difficulty was granted. Unquote. Deeper inquiries into this journal, officers assert that the English were nervous and they were terrified of every natural sound that occurred. They were not used to hostile Native Americans. This had never been in Europe prior, even in the Middle Ages. No European had ever encountered a person like a Native American. They were just completely different people, different cultures. It was almost like for European settlers to see Native Americans, it was almost like they were visitors from another planet. Even though they were, they had their origins in the lands in which they found themselves. Imagine again the ignorant irony of white settlers. Some months later, Monacatootha made an arduous and dangerous journey into Delaware country. He reported his actions to the Pennsylvania Assembly, and they inevitably declared war on the Delaware. Sadly, Monacatootha died in 1757. He dies. And at that time, he was living in Lancaster, present-day Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he was never able to return to his home along the Ohio. In his glorious honor, the borough of Monaca, Pennsylvania, takes his name. This is very brief, but I want to say that this is one of the many instances that you will find where Native American culture was dismantled, uprooted, almost to the point of extinguishment because white settlers wanted lands. They wanted privilege. They wanted freedom. They wanted to carve out their own life at all costs. We see this time and time again with white settlers and Native Americans. And as you look here, and I'm going to turn this a little bit, and as you look at throughout the whole course here, along the Ohio River here in Monaca, Pennsylvania, okay, this is a very, very historic location, not only for Native Americans, but also for the colonists, also for the pioneers, also for the white settlers, everything here. And let me show you something right there. There's Salconk right over there, a very major, important Indian village for trade and conveyance and information and exchange of letters and correspondence. All this right here is going on between Indians and white settlers. This is very colonial. It's very Native American. And it's very, very adept to preserving itself in the history that we have now of our counties and regions, specifically in the Ohio Valley. So I want you to take a moment. I want you to look at all this and see before your own eyes. The Ohiho, which is a Seneca name for the Ohio River, which means good river. Many tribes, many cultures, many tongues, many battles, much blood is spilled, containing all of this information that you see before you. That being all said, let us say this in closing, okay? This contribution and influence of Native Americans of Beaver County, I mean, it's extensive, though not widely appreciated, known, and virtually unspoken of in our high schools. How many of you were exposed to Native American culture? I don't think very many of you. I certainly was not. Consider the following names and places. You know, like I said, Queen Aliquippa, King Beaver. Black Hawk was a village on Lisbon Road. Ohioville, Chippewa, the great Connequanessing, Crows Run Road, Logstown, Ohioville Borough Industry, the Ohio River, the Ohio, it's a Seneca name, which means good river. Raccoon Creek was originally called Raccoon Stream by the Indians. Big Swickley Creek, that's a Shawnee name. I mean, how many more do you know? These are just a few. I know we have them all over the place. Indian culture, Native American culture, indigenous culture, whatever you want to call it. And I'm open to names and identifications. I don't want to offend nobody here, especially if they're of Indian origin, of Native American or indigenous. Okay, correct me. Tell me what you would like to put it in the comments. Let us know what you think. And I just wanted to share this little contribution of this magnificent chief who had so much influence and power over the development of this region and throughout the country, because again, this is almost like a domino effect. And I think in the following videos, I will try to present more detailed information, conveying the, resplendent influence that is still present in our current American history. And it will continue to be that way, I think, for generations to come. And I am proud of that. And I have no Native blood in me. It's been my duty. It's been my sacred duty. It's been my honored and privileged duty to preserve the history of these indigenous people who inhabited where I live now and where I grew up. And I'm proud of that fact. And I hope you will be too. And with that being said, let me end the video by saying that I thank you for your time. I thank you for watching this. I would love to know your comments below. Fill in anything you'd like to talk about, and give me suggestions on what kind of Indian culture that does exist in Beaver County that I have not made mention so far in my videos, and even on my website, beavercountyindians.com. Let me know what you would like to see, what you would like to read. Let us discuss it. Let us be thorough about it. Let us be honest about it. Let the truth be known, whether we like it or not. It has been my experience through all this research, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, the truth is never what we want it to be. I think it is a fallacy. I think it is vindictive, and I think it is arrogant, when we try to conceal or even put armor on the truth. Don't touch it. It's sacred and it's real, and it has its own ring to it, as Ernest Hemingway would say. So with that said, I bid you peace. Thank you for tuning in. This is a little bit of a longer video than I anticipated, but I'm glad to talk to you about this important information, especially about this chief. Let me know else in the comments of whatever else that you would like to discuss. Let me know if you would like another chief to be talked about, maybe something I've never mentioned. The truth is out there. Let's find it together.